If you're sitting the UCAT, please don't make the mistake of assuming that doing 1,000 practice questions will make sure you ace this exam, because that is simply not correct. It's an exam where the most strategic person usually excels. I'll go over what to do first, how to plan your revision, how to revise each section, how much time you actually need to ace the exam, and the mistakes that quietly destroy people's UCAT scores. And because the UCAT changed last year, I'll also go over those changes, and I'll go over these changes and explain how they'll be applicable to your revision. Hi, I'm Sophia. I studied adult nursing at King's College London, and I'm an incoming graduate entry medicine student at the University of Warwick. In this video, I'll go over my experience preparing for the UCAT when I was simultaneously balancing exams, finals, placements, part-time work, and all of those struggles of managing everything at once. Preparing for a program that uses the UCAT can be very tiring and very stressful. I remember spending my whole summer feeling so drained after the trauma of the UCAT, but I hope this video will give you guys some insider tips and some expert advice on how to ace this exam. So what has changed in the UCAT in the recent years? First, I wanted to clarify the current format of the UCAT exam because a lot of information online is currently outdated. The UCAT is no longer the old 5-section exam with abstract reasoning. The current format involves 4 sections: verbal reasoning, decision making, quantitative reasoning, and situational judgment. Your 3 cognitive sections are scored from 300 to 900, giving you a total score from 900 to 2,700. Situational judgment is always separate, with it's allocated into different bands. Band 1 being the highest and band 4 being the lowest. If you're watching YouTube and finding different resources online talking about the UCAT, please be careful, because you need to keep in mind that abstract reasoning has since been removed, which has ultimately completely restructured the scoring system for the UCAT, as well as the way that you will prepare for the UCAT. The key thing is that now your preparation should be more focused since you have less sections to revise. But that doesn't mean that the UCAT is easy. Weaknesses in the other sections like verbal reasoning can have a huge impact now, especially because those extra marks from abstract reasoning have since disappeared. So when should you start preparing for the UCAT? You don't need to start preparing 6 months before your exam. That's simply not manageable in any way possible. In fact, most students will only need between 6 and 8 weeks for appropriate full-time preparation for the exam. There is a huge difference between proper preparation and light work. In my experience, I found it very helpful to start looking at the exam and familiarizing myself with sort of light work or light preparation about 10 weeks before my exam day. If you know that you particularly struggle in certain subjects that may be covered in the exam, it may be appropriate for you to delegate even more time. So that could mean starting to familiarize yourself as far as 12 weeks before the exam, just so you have that sort of knowledge base and you understand what is required of you for the exam. If you know, for example, that you'll struggle a lot with maths, it may be appropriate for you to start 12 weeks before and just start seeing what are the question styles, what does it look like, how best can I approach my studying, and what do I need to refine before I jump into this. Understand the format initially, how are the questions structured, even try a couple questions just to get the hang of things. And most importantly is you need to learn and fully understand what each section is actually testing. I would say, depending on your confidence level after that light preparation, 6 to 8 weeks before you need to start your full-on study revision mode. This will mean delegating daily time to the UCAT exam to ensure that you completely excel. There are people that have studied in 2 weeks before the exam and absolutely failed it, and that has completely delayed all of their goals and their applications. The reason is because UCAT improvement usually comes from pattern recognition, reviewing your past mistakes on questions and different mock papers, improving your timing, and building test strategies. Now, this does take time, which is why for the UCAT it is a marathon, it is not a sprint. Those things require a lot of repetition, a lot of time delegated to understanding where your errors lie. Another thing I want to make very clear is, yes, I would say don't leave this preparation to the last minute, but on the other extreme, please don't spend 3 whole months doing hours and hours of daily intense study practice for this exam, because you're just going to burn out. Notably, there is a sort of peak that you enter, and you want to time that peak for your exam day. So if you start preparing way too early, you will improve until you kind of stagnate, and then it just declines. You kind of want to time that very well. Don't overdo it too far before your exam. The sweet spot is learning how the paper works, starting your practice consistently, and ensuring that you're intensifying in those 6 to 8 weeks before the exam. Biggest UCAT mistakes that people do is practicing loads of questions without actually understanding them. People will say, I did 3,000 practice questions and my score is not improving. Most of the time, it's because they're not actively reviewing their mistakes. You shouldn't be using practice as a proof of productivity. You should be using that feedback to make sure that your study can be tailored and you can really pinpoint those micro topics that you're struggling in. Every question should tell you what you're getting wrong and why. Did you misunderstand the wording? Did you rush through the question, not understand how the maths was working? Or did you just opt for an answer that seemed right because it felt right? This is where improvement happens. It's identifying your errors and understanding where to focus your study. From the beginning, I want you to keep a log of what you're finding most difficult. Nothing complicated, literally just a list or a table of question types that keep stumbling you up or you generally find really difficult to understand. Now, this is going to be your list of weaknesses that you're going to prioritize. Your goal isn't to be perfect. Your goal is to not make the same mistake twice. Moving on, I'd like to discuss my 3-phase UCAT preparation. I like to split the UCAT prep into 3 different stages. Phase 1 is learning the exam, trying to understand each section, how it works, trying untimed questions, learning the different question types, and also kind of working out your baseline knowledge. In this phase, you're effectively gaining information, understanding how the UCAT works, how the question types will appear, and what different sections require of you, as well as simultaneously understanding where your natural strengths lie and where your different weaknesses are. Phase 2 is targeted practice. This is where most of your improvement is going to happen. You focus on one section at a time, implementing timed questions, identifying your weakest question types. This will allow you to gradually build speed and confidence when working through the different sections. For example, in verbal reasoning, you may realize that true, false, can't tell questions are fine, but author opinion questions destroy your accuracy. It's a learning process. In decision making, you might realize that syllogisms are your main weakness that you need to improve on. This is all useful information that you can use to your benefit. Phase 3 is mock exams and refinement. This is the final stage where you build your stamina, your confidence, practicing fully timed exam questions, practicing full timed mock exams, and learning how you're going to perform under those timed pressures. You need to remember that the mock itself is not going to be the most important part, but what is the results that you'll get from it. By doing a mock paper, you'll be able to identify where you're losing those marks. In the timed questions, it allows you to identify those micro topics, but once you come to the mock exam, you can actually see how things would play out in a real time scenario. After every mock, I want you to ask these questions to yourself. Was it knowledge, timing, mechanic, or technique? Which mistakes do I keep repeating? And what is one thing I need to improve before the next mock? This is how you improve systematically. Next up, I'll discuss the main resources I used during my UCAT prep. There are free resources that you can access through the UCAT page, including mock papers, practice questions, and other resources like that are super helpful because, of course, they're coming from the official UCAT board. You can guarantee that these are applicable to your learning. So I do recommend doing all of those mock papers and working through those practice questions. However, I do honestly recommend investing in some sort of paid learning platform. I know most students opt for either Medify or MedEntry. Personally, I used Medify and I scored in the top 10% for the UCAT last year. So I found that Medify was very useful in giving me comprehensive feedback. This is not sponsored, by the way, just genuinely what I used. I know I had a friend who was doing it at the same time as me. She tried both platforms, but ultimately found that Medify was most useful. So I really recommend trying to invest, if you can, in one of those platforms. Obviously, I'm biased towards Medify, but I genuinely think it does give you a really good advantage and a good way to sort of structure your learning, as well as identify those micro topics where you're struggling, because there's a lot of features on the website website where you kind of collate your mistakes and see exactly where you keep losing those marks. Now I'd like to talk about my strategy for verbal reasoning, which is notoriously the most difficult section of the UCAT because of the timing pressures. A big mistake that people make is trying to completely understand the passage beautifully, like it's an English literature exam, but it's not. You need to learn how to scan, how to read with purpose and not waste time on the small details. Before you answer, look at the question and identify what you're searching for. Is it names, dates, strong words, comparisons, causes, conclusions? For true, false, can't tell questions, be very strict. If the passage does not clearly support it, it is not true. Never bring your outside knowledge into this section. Don't just assume or answer based on vibes, because that is not going to get you marks. For long passages, you need to learn how to skip intelligently and methodically. If a passage is dense, confusing, or takes too long to read, flag it and move on. There's no point in wasting your time that you could be using elsewhere and gaining marks. A good strategy for this section is not answering every question perfectly. Practice, practice, practice is all I will say with verbal reasoning, honestly. Next up is decision making. This is probably the section where strategy can make the biggest difference to your outcome. This section tests logic, arguments, probability, Venn diagrams, and interpreting information. The danger can come from trying to do too much of this in your head. Write it down, use the pen and paper provided, or use a whiteboard. Many of these questions can kind of trick you out and aren't as straightforward as they seem. So writing it down allows you to flow along with your line of logic. Draw simple diagrams and break your questions into smaller parts. For syllogisms, don't rely on what sounds sensible. Follow the logic exactly. For strongest argument questions, remember that the strongest argument is the one that is the most directly relevant and addresses the issue at hand. It is not always the most dramatic or most persuasive, so sometimes you can find that you may be swaying yourself because of bias, but remember how to answer these questions. Decision making requires calm and methodical thinking. If you rush this section too much, it becomes very chaotic. Next up is quantitative reasoning. Quantitative reasoning isn't about advanced maths. In fact, it's the opposite. It is usually basic maths, but it's done under enormous time pressure. That means your job is to become accurate and fast. Remember these fundamentals and make sure that you're confident going into this exam and practicing topics like percentages, ratios, averages, rates, conversions, graphs, tables, that sort of maths that you need to make sure that your understanding is concrete with. One of the best things you can do is practice using the keyboard shortcuts and on-screen calculator. Don't wait for the week before the exam to get used to this. As soon as you start your practice, please start learning those keyboard shortcuts. If you're using Medify or another resource, they do allow and simulate those commands so you can accurately represent the exam conditions. But also remember not to overuse the calculator. You can save so much time if you're confident in your basic mental maths, as well as your estimation skills. QR is also a section where skipping matters. Questions are designed to trap you. If a question looks like it needs 5 steps to work out, just flag it and move on. The aim is to maximize your score in the time that's available. Finally, let's talk about situational judgment. Please don't neglect SJT. This section can often go ignored until the last week before the exam, but that shouldn't be the case. A lot of students think that going into it is just common sense, and then they're very surprised when they turn out with a band 3. SJT is not just what would I do, it's a professional standards assessment. You need to understand key clinical themes like patient safety, confidentiality, consent, teamwork, escalation, professionalism, and recognizing your limits. A good rule to think about is that patient safety is first, honesty matters, don't cover things up, never act outside of your competence, and always escalate appropriately. Please pay attention to the wording on each of these questions. Very appropriately often means that it directly addresses the problem and is professionally suitable. Appropriate appropriate but not ideal may be something that helps but doesn't fully resolve the issue. Inappropriate may be unprofessional, unsafe, dismissive, dishonest, or outside of your role. SJT is learnable. Treat it like a section that needs practice, and please don't neglect it. Realistic 8-week plan for the UCAT. Week 1 and 2, I would learn the sections, learn how the exam works, what is required of me, and start doing some untimed practice, move on to some lightly timed practice. I would also start building out a mistake log and understanding where I'm missing those marks. This is the time when you focus on understanding. Between weeks 3 and 5, I would allocate targeted timed practice every day, focusing on 1 or 2 sections, making sure that I'm reviewing my faults properly and understanding where I'm missing those marks. This is where you start identifying patterns. Week 6 and 7, I would do full mocks, timed practice, and section repair. This is where you're going to start acting like the mock is the real exam. Week 8 is your final refinement period. Official mocks from the UCAT website, timing strategy, and exam day prep. A normal study day might be between 60 to 90 minutes, depending on your ability to focus for periods. So you could divide those up if you need to do like 15 minutes at a time and a little break, or maybe you're the type of person that wants to keep going for 2 hours straight, have a break, and then maybe do another hour. But timing isn't important, it's about how focused you are during that period. The key is always consistency with the UCAT. Lastly, I'd like to discuss the day before and the day of the UCAT exam. On the day before, I don't recommend doing any prep. You might be thinking, oh, why? Like, I want to push in as much revision as I can before the exam day. But oftentimes this results in burnout, fatigue, and like a lack of confidence, because what if you do a mock paper the day before your exam and you do absolutely awful? It's just going to knock your confidence going in the next day. So honestly, the day before the exam, don't touch anything, take it easy, try to relax, do something nice, go out with your friends, just do something to take your mind off of the stress. The morning of, it's just your time to stay calm. Don't start trying new techniques the day before or the day of the exam. That's not going to help you at all. Make sure you're using flagging appropriately and you remember those keyboard shortcuts. If a question is taking too long, flag and move on. Don't forget that. Time in this exam is your most valuable resource. And when the exam is finished and you receive your score, use those scores to look at the data and apply to your university strategically. The UCAT can feel very intimidating because it's new, it's stressful, it's time pressured and unfamiliar. But don't forget that it is an exam that you can improve at over time. If you found this video helpful, please leave a comment, like, and subscribe. It really helps this channel. I'll have some more content coming soon that may be relevant to the UCAT exam, as well as medical school admissions. Thank you guys for watching. It's always a pleasure to have you here. I'll see you in the next one. High five.